Jennifer Probst is a New York Times, USA Today, and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, celebrated for her prolific work in contemporary romance fiction. With over 50 books published, her novels have reached readers in more than a dozen languages, sold over 2 million copies, and earned her the title of romance phenom. In addition to her romance novels, Probst writes nonfiction books aimed at fellow writers, candidly sharing her journey from a struggling newcomer to seven-figure deal author. Her website offers a wealth of resources, including tips and videos designed to inspire and guide aspiring authors on their own paths. So, welcome to the program, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me.
You got it. Now, you have a book that just came out, Book of the Month,
Yeah.
which sort of deals with this sort of subject on a writer who's struggling to find her new story as along. I mean, when the first chapter, I want to say I felt depressed by it, but I felt really bad for her just because
Yeah.
being at the writing and knowing that to me, I'll be happy if I was a writer and had a one hit wonder, but to her, it's a sort of a thorn in her side that people keep signing her, want to sign her other books instead of the new
Yes.
book.
Yes. What I loved about it is, first, it was easy to write because I am a writer. So that one was easy to jump into. But what I loved about Aspen being what happened is her first book was penned because she had a total broken heart and she was pouring her angst onto the page. And then the book went viral and you become like queen of the industry. So now she's thinking, okay, this is my career. And she writes books 2 and 3 and they just tank. And she starts to figure out from her agent and everything else that the reason she puts together in her mind that the first book went so is because she was totally annihilated romantically. So now she hooks up, if I get back out there and I have the same thing happen in a big way, I'll be able to write another bestseller. Yeah. So I think, like anything, when you're any kind of artist, you're absolutely right. A breakout hit is it's like the lottery, it means everything, but then you get attached to it, especially if you want a career and you just wanna keep making good books.
And so you mentioned obviously you're a writer. What inspired you to pursue writing, especially this romance novels type of category?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I always knew I was gonna be a writer. I started at 7. I grew up in my mind going, "Okay, when I'm a famous writer one day." And then when I was 12, back in the dinosaur days, there was no internet, there was no anything except some libraries, and all I can figure out from it was, okay, writers just write books. So I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna write a book." So I wrote a young adult romance at 12 years old by hand. I bound it in a folder, I passed it to all my friends, and then they asked me for a sequel, and I was like, "Oh," and then it was born, and so pretty much every year to 2 years, I was writing books before I even knew about how to submit them or how to do anything. I was, like, learning the craft. So it's been a lifelong journey. The main question for being a writer, and I think any creative, is how to make money at it that pays the bills, not as much the writing. I think it's a tough field, and I think you have to go into it with some grit and know that maybe I learned how to write on my lunch hour, plot in the car. I could write for 25 minutes when my kids were running around with SpongeBob, it's kind of like you need to work it into your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, we're gonna get into the 10 signs that you were right, but one thing you mentioned about I forgot where I saw it or heard it. You talked about having, I think it was in your novel, to having the ideal. She had always wants the sort of, she was setting up her writing desk at her sister's house, and she mentions that sometimes when the writing does happen really good, it doesn't matter where you write, and that happens to me a lot. Also, I'm a writer, not so much in novels, but I write news articles,
Love it.
and I always have imagine, oh, I have to have the right music on or something. But when I have something to say, or I know, oh, this is a story, I end up finding out that I have no music on, and I'm
Yes.
just sitting in the room in a cramped space in my weird angle writing, and I'm writing, and oh, I forgot to put music on. I forgot to put this
Yes.
on.
Yes, that's like the street that is the gift. That's when the creativity just like and you're all subconscious, but this is another reason why I always advise writers. I'm like, "You don't need the perfect setting. You don't need the perfect office," like you said. I remember back in the day, I could write anywhere. I trained myself to be able to do that because time is precious, and you can't just wait around for the perfect light or the perfect music or nothing would ever get done. Books would not get written.
Now you talked about even in your one thing I was gonna ask you even before I read the book that you in the I think in the thank you author acknowledgments, you thanked about your sort of your followers as part as like these influencers who gave you your who helped the book along, I guess. That
Yeah.
has changed, haven't it? Since you started writing to now that you only not only have to be a writer, but you
Yeah.
also have to be your own, like, publicist in a way,
Yes.
and
Yes.
going into the writing world, like, maybe go into a Goodreads app or something like that to be relevant.
Yes, it's very it's awful that I can talk about the old days where writers just wrote books, but it is dead true. The people getting involved in the industry now are facing a complete different. If you wanna write just to write, that's different, or self-publish or do anything, but I'm talking about if you want a career, you are literally the CEO of your own business. Even if you got a traditional publishing deal with one of the big publishers in New York or around, they are still expecting you to be on social media, to know how to do TikTok, to know how to do Instagram, to know how to market, to know how to put yourself out there. And that's another piece that we're writers because we're introverts. So putting on that other hat, I think is very hard for a lot of people. So I think you need to try to find your way, the right like industry place. If you hate TikTok and being on it, that's not the place for you. But like you said, there's so many different ways to be available to readers right now. It's finding our way. And book bloggers are still huge. They just turned into more book influencers on TikTok and Instagram rather than just the blogs where you would have like communities of blogs. It's a big industry now. Book talk is like mega powerful. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, and it's great. I think the I don't say the resurgence, but I mean, print books has always been there, but a lot of folks want print books now again. I myself go both ways. I have a tablet that I read on, and I also have a book, physical book. So I go both ways on that. Do you have a preference or?
Just like you, when we were talking about doing audio, doing books, I have a toppling pile of print books because sometimes I just want that, especially sometimes different genres, like maybe like a self-help book or something like that. I like to hold in my hand and like chapter to chapter. And then, my e-reader, oh my goodness, I'm surprised it doesn't smoke sometimes. It's got so many books.
We'll talk. Let's talk about the 10 signs that you are a writer. Let's talk about what are the 10 signs that you are a writer, and how do these traits play into how did these traits play into your own writing journey?
I think there's a lot of signs that you're a writer. Some are humorous, some are just part of the business, and I think some develop the more that you sit with your work and you write. But I think most definitely you're a sign that you're a writer when you have imaginary people living in your head. When you're half in this world and half in another. It is a really lovely thing. I know people when they're kids, they have the imaginary stuffed animals or imaginary this. These are like real people that you bring to bed with you at night that you're like waking up to try to figure out their plot line. And it is really a very unique kind of aspect. And they do say that writers who take personality tests score very high towards schizophrenia, which is very scary to me and my husband. But yet here we are. So yeah, there's a lot of imaginary things going on in like your real life and you're always like kind of torn apart there. And I think the other thing is just the love for reading and the love for, like, seeing things outside of just maybe a screen. The imagination is so rich that you're always kind of building your own, like, if you want your happy ever after, you write it. So, when I was a young girl, if I couldn't get the hot guy from the football team, I'm gonna write it, and then I get it. So, you get to live in these different worlds, and I think that's important. And, like, paying attention is people who eavesdrop on your conversations, be careful, they're writers. That's me in the back of you at the diner, hearing if you're gonna break up or not, and telling my husband to order another cup of coffee until I hear, like, the end of the if they're gonna break up or they're not gonna break up, and then it's gonna be going into a book. So, there's a lot of those types of signs, and being able also to just, like, focus and just put on the blinders of your story, and, like, we were talking about reading, you fall away from this world. And I think that's that creativity that you latch onto, you're not here anymore. You're, like, in your imaginary book world. Not a lot of people have that gift, which is amazing to me. I thought that we could just everybody had the gift. I'm gonna go away in my mind right now, but I guess that's not true.
No, I think you're absolutely right because I think nowadays I think technology has captured our attention and I think the attention span. I grew up in the age obviously with no technology as far as like cell phones and things like that. I remember writing on a typewriter my stories when I, as a kid like yours. I came up with a story
Yeah,
and I went into a typewriter. That was all that was available.
love it.
And I
Yes,
think nowadays you have so much information coming at you. And
yes.
I think your attention sometimes is thrown. But if a good book does do that for you, it takes you away
Yeah,
and you get
yeah.
involved in other people's lives for a while.
Yeah. Definitely, and I love movies, but it is very different because when you're reading a book with your imagination, you're actually working in a totally different way, and I tell my kids all the time, and they laugh at me, but I was like, "Be bored," because people who are not bored, they're not thinking creatively, and you hear some of the biggest thinkers in the world, not just writers and artists, but, like, in business, they will have digital detox weeks where all they will do is read. They will read, they will walk, they will be bored because that's connecting our mind. So I think especially in today's environment with all the things going on in the world, I mean, hello, who doesn't want to read a romance about some hope and inspiration and positive? I mean, I think we just desperately need that now.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely that's why I do like the print book still because it is an escape. Even with my tablet, sometimes I use my tablet as my entertainment hub. Sometimes I'm reading, all of a sudden put on Max or something,
Yeah.
Netflix like that at the same time. But it's always to me, it's always the characters that make the good books. I remember as a young kid, one book that I remember reading. I think it was 10 years old. It was a Vietnam book made for young readers. I was just enthralled by it, and I took it everywhere with me. And I felt these characters were real.
Yeah.
These were real people, and sometimes as I get older, it was a little I got nervous and maybe could do with my anxiety or something. I got nervous to get start a new book because I think, "Oh, I don't wanna get involved with someone's life." Perfect example, I'm a big Stephen King fan.
Huge. Me too. Huge. I just finished You Like It Darker. Oh, it was so
Oh,
good.
okay, wow.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I started the Dark Tower series a couple of years ago, and it took me, like, 5 years to read the whole series little by little, and at the end of the book, at the end of the whole series, I was really sad. I was depressed for, like, a week.
Oh,
Just because I've been through these with this journey through years already with these people, and my
yeah.
own life changed in those years. We had the pandemic and all
Yeah.
of that, and, it was just all of a sudden these people are gone and from our lives, and I
Yeah.
don't know where they went and what's gonna happen next to them, things like that. And for you as a writer who has to come up with these characters, do you feel attachment to them as far as after you've finished reading and writing the book, are sad that you won't be able talking to this character anymore or write more about their lives or things like that?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. And you just spoke to my book loving heart so much because it is so true. I remember back in the day holding a book to my heart because it was the only way to like get it as close as possible. There
Mm.
was just so many feelings there. And that is the type of passion that I bring to my writing because characters are everything. I always say you can have the most interesting plot, but if you don't care about the people that are going through that plot, it's just not going to matter. So, yes, there are certain books that I think that I have dove more deeply into, probably books that I wrote around different times in my life that was hard, like when I was going through like depression or when I lost my dad. I remember that book was really, really hard afterwards. I could barely get through it, but it just contained so much rawness and that actually translated into characters who feel because there's nothing that I hate more than a character who's too perfect or lays flat on the page. I like to go deep with all their quirks and all their flaws and there's something what they call the growth arc where when you open up the book, any one of my books, what you're going to get in your cat in my hero and heroine from page 1 is going to be completely different at the end because that's the most satisfying story, right? When we read that everything's changed. Hopefully for the better, but that growth for different characters, however it is done, even if they took wrong roads and wrong detours, isn't that so human? And so at the end, I feel like the magic is that we can see ourselves in the characters. That's really where, but all that is like subconscious. So, yes, when I'm bringing it to the page, I have to layer a lot. That first draft is not going to nail it for me. Many times, like I'll write the book, figure it out, then go through it again. And yes, sometimes I actually have to read the entire book to say goodbye to it because this is the other secret. Once it's written and into the world, it's not mine anymore. It just doesn't belong to me. It's not my baby. It's done. It's been put out there. It's for the world to love it, to hate it, to review it, to pass it around. But when I'm working on it, it's truly just mine and I'm extremely attached.
And you mentioned that one thing I sort of related to, you have a 10 list on your website, the 10 signs that you're a writer. And one
Yeah.
thing that I related to was that you feel like an imposter and a failure the majority of the time. Because I feel like, I'll be honest with you, I sometimes hate the process of writing. I don't write anything creative. I do have the urge nowadays to go down a creative. My background is photography. That's why that was my
Oh, that's so
passion. It still
creative.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then writing happened because of my job.
Yeah.
photojournalist who went to the newsroom and you say you have to write. I struggled to write 100 words at the beginning, but now I can write 1,000 words easily. And I never considered myself a writer, but someone told me, so you're a writer. It might be a different type of writer, but you are a writer.
Yeah.
And you see that you have the imposter syndrome, sort of failures a majority of the time. You can just go more into that because you are a writer, you are a published writer, but how can you still feel an imposter?
It's
Um,
amazing to me. I can only tell you that I don't know if this is in other careers, it must be, but every time I open up a new manuscript and I look at that blank page, it doesn't matter if I have a map of the characters or the story, I feel like I'm starting for the first time all over again. You feel like an imposter to your own success. And authors talk about this all the time, how we have this voice inside. It's called the inner critic. And it comes, I think, to most artists, and it's there whispering in your ear, this isn't going to be a good book. Everybody's going to know that you're really a failure. This is going to suck. What is your mom going to say? What is your elderly aunt going to say if she reads that scene? Oh my God, this. And it goes on and on. So quieting that noise and just being able to be brave enough to follow the story. And I can't even tell you how many times the book that I'm writing right now, it's in an awful snag. And this is book 56, I think. And it is in an awful snag, and I keep coming back to the page, coming back to the page, and I'm so frustrated. But I know that it needs the tangle will happen. I know my tools to use. I know to sit there sometimes until I break through. But this is something that every single day I go through. It's not, sometimes I don't have easy writing days. And other days when it's flowing, and I know you feel this way too, when the stream of consciousness is coming, it's like, an adrenaline rush. It's like riding a roller coaster. It is everything. And you chase that again and again. It is pure creativity. And that's what I love about it. But it never ends. And that's what I tell young writers all the time. Don't think that don't be scared of it because you've got to make friends with it. You are going to feel like this, whether you're a 7-figure author, whether you're poor and struggling. And I've been all over the map. I've been poverty, I've been middle of the pack, and I've been 7 figures. So I'm very comfortable with all levels and I can write at any of them.
right. One thing I do when I do struggle to begin an article, I always tell myself, just go ahead, start writing what I do know about
Yeah.
things. And it's in the art, and the article tells me what I need. And I go,
Yeah.
I need to talk to this person, and that changes things here. One thing in the press release I find interesting, you wrote about how to write a book in 30 days. Is that
Yes.
possible?
Yes, it is. There was something called NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. I've done it for many years, especially when I was younger. It's November, actually. It's November for the entire month. You're supposed to write 50,000 words in 30 days. And people who have always wanted to write a book and can't, they spend a lot of time clearing their November. Now, you do not have to do this in November, but there's a lot of support and links and write in places that you can go for the support that you need. I've been on deadline. I have done a book in 30 days. I would not recommend it. I have done it many times on a deadline. And basically, it's putting everything else aside. It's let your house be dirty, eat pizza, find somebody to watch your kids, whatever you have to do. Your main primary goal is every spare moment of your time is work on your book. And so you immerse yourself in the whole project. And immersion is like such a good way to do it. And then you need a lot of sugar, maybe some wine. You need somebody who can support you and bring you food when you're out of it. You write nights, you write early mornings, you write around your life. And it shows you that you can have, even if you don't make the 50,000 words, what if you even have 10,000 or 20,000? That's a portion of a book right there that you can make inroads into your creative process. So I think it's really important.
Right. What is your process of writing? Because I know you're a mother, you have a family, and I myself have a young daughter. So I know when she was born, life changes, and
Oh,
my schedule now doesn't. My schedule's not my own anymore.
yes.
It's whatever I have time after she goes to bed and things like that. But for you, what is your process? Do you have say, hey, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. I'm gonna write and things like that? Do you have a set schedule like that, or whenever you can write, you write?
You know what? When my kids were little, it's just like what you said. I always say people, sometimes you're taking care of an elderly parent or you have sickness in the house or you have there's no such thing when you plan your calendar and you go, I'm going to write this book and then life comes at you. So I've always been flowy about my schedule depending on what my kids need. But at the same time, if you're going to write and it's a job, I treat it as a job. I don't treat it as a hobby. There's a big difference in mindset. So my kids know deadline, editor. They knew these were buzzwords when they were in diapers. So like editor, mommy's got to talk to her editor. I have learned, so my kids have grown up to appreciate what I do in here, that I show up for my work. I think action is so important and seeing parents go after their dreams is so important. But I've also been known when my kids come in, if I'm on deadline, I promise them I got to get through 3 more days, but this weekend is yours. We're going to leave the house. We've got to, so there's compromise in there. You got to revolve around school schedules and school events. So I think that you look at your schedule, you do the best that you can with the day, but then there's a balance of where turn off the Netflix. Step away from the Netflix as much as you step away from things that, you know what I mean, and put in the time to write.
Now let's talk about your new book that just came out, the book of the month. I just have a
Yeah.
copy right here. Now let's talk about this character because it's based on a writer. How much of this character did you put yourself into this character?
That is such a good question. Okay, first, I'm happily married, so I'm not gonna need, like, a big heartbreak with a hot bachelor and Outer Banks, so that's good. But I can relate to Aspen being a writer because with her first book now, even though I've been writing since 12, it took me, like, 30 years for my book to finally go viral, and that opened up the opportunity for me to go full time. I thought it would be really fun because you hear about one-hit wonders all the time, especially with musicians or actors or actresses, and I thought it would be fun to have a writer whose bestseller was picked as book of the month and she goes viral and she's everywhere and everybody loves her book and she can't go anywhere without talking about it. Then she writes 3 more and those go into obscurity. Nobody wants it. So she'll go to these book signings and everybody doesn't, and she'll have toppling piles of her new books everywhere. Her publishers like sell the new books and all they want to do is her old book, sign this book. I want to talk about your first book. So she's feeling like she's lost her mojo. And then she decides, oh my gosh, that first book came because she was with this terrible heartbreak. She went through a total heartbreak and she put it on the page. So now she equals, I need to get annihilated emotionally again so I can go back to my former self and put it on the page because she's stuck in her little penthouse apartment and she's surrounded by like, safe things. She needs to go out and get her heart broken. So that's where it comes from. And so the writer part is a lot of me. But the fiction part is the romance and the fun and right and seeing The Bachelor and having that whole fake dating premise.
Now, the book of the month presents, sort of a unique spin on, I guess, the quote unquote fake dating. What exactly is fake dating? Because I'm not with that yet.
It's so in the romance world, there's something that readers love and it's called tropes. And tropes are really just things that come from fairy tales. They're classic things that you can break apart from like Beauty and the Beast and all of the ones. So fake dating is super fun because it takes the main characters, the hero and heroine, and it forces them together and it forces them to pretend to be in an intimate situation. And of course, that could be a lot of fun, especially if it's opposites. If so, a fake date would be like, my relatives are bugging me, right? Because I'm not married yet. And well, my sisters are married and there's this big wedding coming up. So I go to my friend who's a male and I'm like, you need to like pretend to be my fiance. Like I need my mom off my back or whatever. So we go to this wedding and we pretend to be dating, but through that pretense, there's intimacy that goes on. So that's really what the fake dating and could be in so many different circumstances. So it's a fun way for readers to connect.
Now, you explore so many themes in your books and types of character across your 50 plus books that you have written. What's something new that you love to explore in your upcoming work?
Let's see, the new work that I'm working on, I think one of my favorite things that one of my themes is found family, where I love writing about big Italian families. That's one of my favorite. But I do love the found family where they may not have their parents or aunts or uncles and they're all lonely, but either a community or people who work together or some friends who are brought together like the misfits. That's I think one of my favorite things. Like all the misfits come together and they make their own community, and found family is such this beautiful, fun kind of things. You can explore different personalities and you choose to be with those people. It's not blood that's like forcing you to do it, but that chosen thing. So I think that's a really fun theme that I'm exploring in my next books.
So, Jennifer, before we go, where can folks find you, your information, your website, your Instagram, or whatever social media is? Where can people find more information for you about you?
Yeah, I would always point them directly to my website. There is so many fun things on there. It's www.jenniferprobst.com. And you can get a free book if you sign up for my newsletter. I give it away for free. There's tons of extras. There's a video about me and my author life with my cute little dogs on there. There's tons of things about writers, everything about my new release. So it's a lot of fun. And all my socials are on there. I'm on TikTok and Instagram at author Jennifer Probst. But if you go to my website, you can find it all.
Any sort of tips who before we go, anyone who's listening to this and say, "You know what? Maybe I wanna take on that challenge in November of,
Yeah.
writing a book." Any tips to get started or just in general if someone wants to be a writer?
Yeah, and you don't even need November, but, like, it's right around the corner, so maybe you
Yeah,
wanna just jump into the entire community. I think the most important thing is to have fun with it and don't be so hard on yourself. It's supposed to be a journey, so don't get in your head like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna write this book in a month, and I've gotta pitch it to an agent, I've gotta" find your voice, have some fun, dig into, like, characters or your family or memories, even, like, some kind of memoir is a great way to get started where you're, like, thinking about holidays or memories when you were a kid or things that were funny in your life and just start writing. Write something every single day because I really believe one word begets another. And then at the end of the month, no matter what you do with that's something really special. You like put yourself on the page, you were brave, and you did something that nobody else can do in your unique fingerprint. And I think we need everybody's stories so badly nowadays.
absolutely. Well said. So we'll talk to Jennifer Probst, author of the latest book, A Book of the Month, and she's also has a website, jenniferprobst.com. Talks about the writings and the craft of writing, and you'll find out the top 10 signs that you may be a crazy, aka writer.
Go check it out.
Yeah, definitely. Jennifer, thank you so much for talking to me. I do really appreciate it. I'm enjoying the book, and I'm enjoying that hearing about the process of being a writer because that's always interests me. Everyone has different way about it, but ultimately, it's just about getting started and start
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on today. I love that you're also a writer and just talking about the industry and people coming in and knowing that you read my book. I really appreciate it. It means a lot. So thank you.
You got it, Jennifer.